I was stunned, hurt, concerned, confused. How could this be? At this point, it felt like I'd been stripped of any authority to even make a decision, as if my opinion didn't matter and I was simply just expected to go along with this new plan, with his agenda.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey, welcome to episode number 135. Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. We're so grateful for those of you who continue to join us every week. And hey, I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. One, I would love for you to follow the show, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else. And I know I say that every week, and you might be wondering, this guy's like a broken record. Why does he say that?
I was thinking that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you think that about me all the time.
I do.
So one of the reasons this is important is because every other week, we're dropping a simple step only into the podcast platform. We're not emailing anybody. It doesn't go on our website. It doesn't go anywhere else. And if you're not following the show, you might miss the simple steps. And you don't want to do that. Every other week, you're going to miss those bonuses. So make sure that you follow the show, again, wherever it is that you listen. And then the other thing we would love for you to do, again, I say it every week, we would love a rating or a review. Why is that important? Because if you're anything like me, when I'm checking stuff out, whether it's a podcast or a book or a product of some kind, I'm looking at the reviews. Like we were just booking a little trip here, and I'm looking at the reviews of the hotel. And every time I look at those reviews, it really helps me to make a decision about whether I want to engage with that particular product or show or whatever it is.
Right.
So when you give feedback, it's going to help those other people that are looking for help to determine, hey, is this going to be the right show for me? And so we just love to hear your feedback. So just hit the star wherever you listen to rate us. And if you have an opportunity over on Apple Podcasts, leave a review and tell us what you think. We'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. So enough of my broken record. And let's start in on what we're going to talk about today. You know, over the past couple weeks, we've been talking about decision making and how challenging it is for couples living in blended family dynamics to make good decisions and stay connected as a couple.
Right.
It's really tough sometimes. And one area that can create a lot of confusion and tension and sometimes disconnection between us is when it's time to negotiate something big or sometimes small with an ex-spouse.
Right. And we're definitely not strangers to this kind of challenge. In fact, it's a major piece of our story.
Yep.
You know, early on, we believed that co-parenting with my former spouse would be fairly reasonable to navigate.
Yeah.
He and I were really, for the most part, pretty cooperative co-parents for 10 years following our divorce, I'd say.
Yeah.
But when my daughter Annika turned 12, and Mike and I at this point were about 6 years into marriage, my ex-spouse had a major attitude shift towards me and towards our home. Kind of out of the blue, he just decided that the time that Annika would spend with us needed to be radically reduced. Now, we still don't know the reason for this big attitude shift.
Yeah.
And like I said, for 10 years, we'd been peacefully co-parenting with a 50-50 schedule that really seemed to be working for everyone.
Yep.
But suddenly it all changed. One day, my ex requested a meeting with me alone. But when I showed up to the meeting, he wasn't alone. He'd brought our daughter Annika with him. And he positioned Annika in front of me and instructed her, "Now tell your mom what you want." Now, Annika, who was obviously nervous and upset, she just kind of stared at the floor. And so he continued to prompt her until she flatly stated, I want to live at my dad's house now.
And she was 12.
12.
Yeah.
And I was blindsided and overcome with emotion. You know, my daughter and I, we had a close relationship. Yet in this moment, she wasn't even able to look me in the eye. I couldn't understand why she'd make such a request. None of it made sense to me, honestly.
Sure.
And at that point, my ex took over the conversation and he proceeded to go on and on about how this would be the best thing for Annika and that if I really loved her, I'd agree to this new arrangement. And that was his side of the story. He believed my daughter didn't need to spend time with me, that I wasn't needed in her life. So as I sat there in confusion, I tried to assess the situation, but my emotions seemed to override me in the moment.
Yeah.
I was stunned, hurt, concerned, confused. How could this be? At this point, it felt like I'd been stripped of any authority to even make a decision, as if my opinion didn't matter and I was simply just expected to go along with this new plan, with his agenda.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a horrible moment. I felt overwhelmed and powerless. My own child was being used to pressure me into a scheduling change that would rob me of my relationship with her. I found myself emotionally blindsided. I really tried to understand why Annika was requesting this change, but she withdrew and her dad took over. He applied pressure and he tried to back me into a corner. According to him, if I didn't comply, I'd be going against what was best for our daughter. But what was actually best for her? In that moment of confusion, I was unable to stand up to the pressure and advocate for the right decision, and so I hesitantly agreed. Because of this regretful reaction in the moment, this meeting was the start of a long and very painful battle in the family courts, which had a significantly negative impact on Annika's relationship with me and our family, and on her emotional well-being. But, you know, maybe things could have been different.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I remember you coming home from that meeting and kind of sharing what was going on. And there was a part of me that really wanted to have some empathy, but there was part of me that was like, no, like, why did you agree to that? Right. And it actually created conflict between us.
Right.
And so now here we are, you're at this major decision point, and on top of that, we're having some disagreement in the process.
Yeah.
And, you know, we realize that this story, it's a bit on the extreme side of these co-parenting negotiations. But the reality is we all come up against a variety of decisions, big and small, that need to be negotiated with the next spouse. And these decisions almost always have some kind of impact on our home and often impact our marriage and our relationship with our kids as well. And over the years, we've had the opportunity to coach step couples around all kinds of big and small negotiations with former spouses and create ways to make good decisions that unify their current marriage, even when an ex presents an expectation or a request that causes confusion, pressure, and maybe even conflict.
Right.
And that's where we want to focus today.
Yes, this is a struggle we hear about a lot from blended family couples, and step family expert Patricia Paper now says that it's common for step couples to make easy wrong turns. And simply put, these are mistakes that we tend to inadvertently make when navigating the complexities of blended family life.
Yep.
They're kind of those pitfalls we don't see coming.
That's right. You know, and most of us are going to struggle when faced with this tough situation or indecision or lack of awareness. But we can avoid these easy wrong turns. So let's talk about how you might make better decisions and stay united as a couple when it comes to negotiating with an ex.
You know, I definitely made an easy wrong turn in that fateful meeting with my ex, and many more along the way. But I eventually learned how to make better decisions in the heat of the moment when my ex was pressuring me or when he became confrontational.
Yep.
And you can do this too, even when you're feeling blindsided, emotionally overwhelmed, confused, or powerless. So let's jump in. We're going to explore 3 specific strategies that might really help.
That's right. The first strategy is to push pause on pressure. Now, we touched on this 2 weeks ago in our episode where we shared some do's and don'ts about decision making. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes in case you missed that episode. But really, we don't want to succumb to the pressure when a decision needs to be made. It's really critical. Because when it comes to seeking out the best decision for each situation, as well as remaining united as a team in our current marriage, we've got to do that not in a pressure tank.
Right.
It takes some practice, but the reality is you don't have to allow yourself to be pressured into making decisions on the spot. And you really don't have to allow your kids to be directly involved in issues that need to be worked out between the adults.
Yeah, in hindsight, I should have never engaged in a conversation with my ex about changing visitation in front of our daughter. You know, I could have pushed pause on the pressure I was experiencing by saying that I needed some time to think about it.
Yeah.
But because my emotions were high, I wasn't thinking clearly. I felt trapped and I wasn't able to respond well. So anytime you find yourself in a situation where you're blindsided and maybe you're not thinking clearly or you feel pressured into making a decision, it's usually time to push pause. So excuse yourself from the conversation, even if it's to escape to the bathroom to calm down and just allow your emotions to level off. Wait until you're able to think clearly. Now, unless there's a medical emergency going on or someone's in danger, it's okay to respectfully ask to schedule a later time to continue the discussion with your ex. This will give you an opportunity to process through all the possible options, brainstorm decisions with your current spouse, and if you need to, you can consult with a coach, a counselor, or an attorney about the decision at hand.
Yeah, that's right. You know, honey, you mentioned that Annika should not have been part of that meeting and present while you and your ex were discussing visitation.
What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
Yeah, it's simply inappropriate to intentionally put kids in the middle of conversations that should be handled between the adults. This adds a lot of emotional stress to the child. And unless there's an issue of abuse or safety, it's never a good idea for a child to be put in a position of having to choose between their parents. This is something they really aren't mature enough to handle, even if they seem like they're a mature kid.
Yeah, sometimes that can be really deceiving, right? So if you had your wits about you in that moment and you'd been able to set a clear boundary with your ex, what would that have sounded like?
Well, I might have said something like this. I've heard your perspective on this, and this is too important of a decision to be made in this moment. I can't give you any kind of answer right now, but I'll consider everything I've heard and schedule another time to talk with you about this.
Okay. So you would have acknowledged the issue, but not allowed the pressure to force you into a snap decision in the moment, right? That's good, of course. Now, by that point, Annika had already been put in the middle of the conversation. So how might you have addressed all of that with her later on? Because somehow there's got to be a follow-up, right?
Yeah, that's a good question, because unfortunately, sometimes kids get put into the middle or even recruited by that other parent to put the pressure on you.
Yeah.
And that was certainly what was happening for me. But what I could have done after pushing pause on the pressure was to wait until Annika's next visitation time with us and just said something like this. Honey, I just want you to know that your dad and I are the ones who will be making these kinds of decisions, okay? We both want good things for you, and we're capable of working this out in a way that's best for you.
Okay, so it sounds like you would have kept it really simple. You would have avoided bad-mouthing the other parent,
Right.
And just tried to give some reassurance that the child doesn't need to be in the middle. Is that right?
Yeah. And if the child, presses you with something like, well, my dad says that I'm old enough to choose where I live. Then again, keep it simple with something like, I understand why this is confusing, and I'm not sure why your dad believes that. But I'm confident that we can make a good decision about this without putting you in the middle.
So again, keeping it simple and not directly bad-mouthing anybody, but almost like you're kind of playing dumb. Like, oh, I don't know why your dad thinks that. I'm not sure, right?
Right, exactly. And this is a tough position to be in. But remember to put your own emotions aside and focus on helping your child understand that the adults are the one to be making this kind of decision. And this approach can be tweaked and applied to other scenarios where your kids have been inappropriately involved, not just around schedules and visitation, but things like financial decisions and so on, that type of thing.
Yeah, all kinds of things.
Yeah. So you want to do what you can to protect your kids and keep them out of the middle of negotiations as much as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our first strategy. Press pause on the pressure.
Yeah, press pause. Don't make a snap decision.
No, no, learn from my mistakes, please. All right, what's the next strategy, honey?
Okay, the next one is 3 parts. Okay, examine your emotions, stay rooted in the truth, and identify the values that are going to guide you in the decision.
Ooh, important stuff.
That's right. So when negotiating with an ex around decisions, it's important to take some time to examine your emotions and process through them. It's common for post-divorce parents to become emotionally triggered with guilt or with fear sometimes. We shared a story a couple weeks ago about a dad who was put on the spot when his ex-wife called from the music store and asked for him to contribute to a new expensive instrument for their son who was going to participate in band at school.
Right.
And really, who was with her there at the store picking out the instrument right in the moment. And she was expecting him to just cough up several $100s in the moment. There's emotion in that.
Absolutely. And if I put myself into his shoes, I'd probably be experiencing some tough emotions in that moment during that call.
Sure.
I'd certainly experience fear that if I pushed pause or if I said, no, I can't commit to that right now, then I'd worry about how my child might internalize that. Would he think that I wasn't being supportive? Would he be impacted by any negative fallout from his mom, who's might be really disappointed and throw me under the bus as the reason why he can't have that new instrument right now?
Yeah.
Would she badmouth me in front of my child? Maybe, like me, this dad experienced some guilt in that moment. My child has had a hard time adjusting since the divorce, and he deserves this. You know, when guilt hits, we might try to overcompensate or make up for the pain that our child has experienced.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard fear and guilt. Those are two really powerful emotions. And this dad may have been experiencing those in that moment of decision.
Right.
And you've probably experienced those as well, huh?
Yes, I have. And, you know, I found that when I make a decision in the heat of a fearful or guilt-ridden moment, that's a decision I usually end up regretting later on.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, it's because I'm making it just to relieve my own discomfort, not because it's what's best for my child or my family. For me, making snap decisions that are rooted in fear and guilt, that seems to be a bit of a cop-out, right? I'm taking the easy road for me emotionally in that moment. But then later I realized that my decision had long-lasting consequences that often went against my values.
Yep.
And I'd actually failed to teach my kids valuable life lessons or set a good example for them.
Sure.
That's why when I make a decision based on fear or guilt, I usually end up regretting those decisions.
And it's kind of a reaction rather than a response. And it's certainly when it's fear and guilt and it causes a snap judgment decision, then it creates some tension between you and me.
Oh, yeah.
And that often happens with couples where, you had to make kind of a unilateral decision that impacted me, just like this dad needing to make a decision that was going to impact a budget.
Yeah, we talked about that a few weeks ago.
Absolutely. So instead of making a decision based on your own emotion, like fear or guilt or whatever it might be, what do we need to do instead?
Well, first, just do some self-reflection and identify the emotion, and then just simply call it out and own it so that you can process through the emotion with a trusted person who will listen and validate you. Then redirect your focus onto the truth. Now, the truth about this dad was that he'd been very supportive with his son's activities and interests over the years. He was a supportive dad. There was no doubt about it.
Yep.
And even if his ex chose to throw him under the bus, his consistent, steady support would most likely counteract any negative comments because those comments simply weren't true.
Right, right.
Sometimes we've just got to trust that the truth about who we are as a parent is bigger than any negative comments our ex might try to spin against us. The reality is that our kids experience our true character, and we have to learn to rely on that. So as long as we've been consistent and steady, our actions really will speak louder than anyone else's words.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so first we're examining our emotions and processing them in a healthy way before we make a decision based on those emotions.
Exactly.
Because we really do want to make the right decision, not just the one that relieves our own emotional tension in the moment.
Right.
And then we want to intentionally shift our focus away from those negative emotions that might be creating an inaccurate story in our mind. And we do that by staying rooted in the truth of who we are as a parent or who we are as a person.
Yes. And then we want to identify our values and intentionally make a decision that falls in line with our family values.
Right.
So again, if we were to put ourselves into the shoes of this dad and his current wife, we might brainstorm different ideas around how we could meet the needs of his child, who really did need an instrument for band, and at the same time, stay true to our family's values before we give an answer to his ex-wife.
Okay. So in our family, that would be sort of simple, but only because we've spent some time clarifying our family's values and what's most important to us.
We have, yes.
So in this scenario, I'd say that, we value being responsible with money and spending decisions, especially around things that can be repaired or repurposed.
Right.
So we also value resourcefulness, and we want to teach our kids the value of delayed gratification and contribution.
Right.
I can think of an example in our own family where our mutual kids were both in the unicycle club. Yes, they both ride unicycles. They do it quite well, actually.
Yeah.
And they had this little club at school, and they decided along the way that, I don't want to use the school's unicycles anymore. We need our own brand new unicycles, right? That was what they wanted.
Yeah, even though the school did provide them with a unicycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they'd been using the school's ones all along.
Right.
So, it kind of went against our value. We had to really talk through this, but it went against our values to just run out and buy them some brand new expensive unicycles just to appease them, even though we were tempted to. Mm-hmm. We really didn't need to just lean into leaving in our own emotions of that tension was, oh, yeah, we should probably buy these because this is a good activity, right? But we had to work through that.
That's right. Good example there, honey. Instead, we brainstormed as a family how we might raise the money they needed to purchase the unicycles themselves. I think we told them that we were willing to contribute some money.
Yeah.
What was it, like $50 each?
50 or 75
something like
or something like
yeah.
that. Yep. But then they came up with some great ideas around how they could earn the rest. I think we all worked together and organized a garage sale. They ended up pulling a bunch of stuff out of their room, like old toys and games and stuff that they didn't use anymore. And they were able to save up and buy the unicycles themselves with only a little bit of contribution from us.
And in the meantime, they continued to borrow the school's equipment,
Yep.
which was resourceful. And they learned delayed gratification. They learned to repurpose things they already had by selling them and passing them on to someone else, as well as the value of responsibly saving money and working towards a goal.
Right.
And they felt really good that day.
They did.
That they were able to walk in and plunk down the money and purchase their own unicycles.
That's right. So we resisted taking the easy road and just buying them what they wanted in the moment, which we might have done if we were reacting to our emotions or to the pressure, like all the kids' parents bought them their new unicycles.
Yeah,
right?
all the other kids have one.
Yeah. So instead, we decided we were going to make a values-based decision and stayed true to what was most important for our family. So what about the couple with this son who needed a band instrument? Well, the husband might have pushed pause on the pressure and then examined his own emotions, noting any guilt or fear, and then talked through that decision with his current wife based on their family values. It could very well be that they would decide to contribute the money for the instrument after all, but now they're making a decision from a place of unity as a couple, and it doesn't create a conflict when several $100s hit something that wasn't budgeted, right?
Right.
It hits the budget and wasn't budgeted for.
Right.
So just having that opportunity to examine all that and talk about it as a couple, the decision may end up being exactly the same. But man, it's so much better for our unity within our home.
Yeah. Or the decision might be something totally different.
That's right.
Okay. So that's kind of a 3-part strategy. Examine your emotions, stay rooted in the truth, and identify the guiding values that are important to you in the decision that you're making.
That's right.
And these go hand in hand because if you stay stuck in fear or guilt and you're hung up on untruths about who you are as a parent, you just won't have the capacity to focus on your values and make a decision based on what's most important or make the best decision.
That's right.
And if you're unclear about your family's values and you're wondering if you and your spouse are on the same page around what you value most and what your priorities are, we'd love to help you with that.
Yeah.
We found that it's very difficult for blended couples to make good decisions and stay united if they haven't identified their family's values. And you can use the link in the show notes to schedule a free coaching call if you'd like to learn more about a simple, speedy, step-by-step process to making your united values crystal clear to the whole family.
That's right.
So
Yep.
important.
Yep.
Okay, so that's your second strategy. Examine your emotions, stay rooted in the truth, and identify the values that are important to you. So, honey, what's our final strategy for today?
Okay, the final one is set and maintain appropriate boundaries.
Ooh.
This one's a process and it might take some work, especially if you're still stuck in some old patterns with your former spouse, patterns that might need to be changed and new boundaries put in place.
Right.
But this is something that's critical. And we often get to teach couples about how to establish healthy boundaries in all their relationships with their kids and stepkids, with each other, with the in-laws, and yes, even with former spouses.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It makes me think about one couple we supported. The wife, we'll call her Cindy, she had an established pattern with her ex that started right after their divorce and continued during her years as a single mom. She told her ex that whenever he was busy and needed childcare during his visitation time with their son, that she would be happy to help out and take their child. She wanted the right of first refusal. So rather than calling a babysitter during his visitation time, he'd call his ex-wife, Cindy, and she'd drop everything to come and get their son. Take care of things.
Yeah, and that was a great arrangement for Cindy at the time because she got to spend additional time with her son over and above her regularly scheduled visitation.
Right.
And because she was single, she didn't have too much going on personally. Her focus was really primarily on her son at that time. So it was easy for her to meet her ex's requests when he'd call her up. Sometimes even at the last minute or right in the moment. He'd ask her to pick their son up from school or watch him for a while he was busy or whatever it was that was needed. We really get that. As a newly divorced single parent, it makes sense how difficult it often is to adjust to shared custody and to miss out on time with your child. So during that single parent season of Cindy's life, this arrangement with her ex worked really well, and it seemed to make sense at the time.
Yeah. But seasons change, and this is where things can get sticky and tricky. Because Cindy started dating a wonderful man we'll call Sam, who happened to have 3 kids of his own. Very busy, active kids.
Here's a story.
And as it happened, Cindy and Sam started out as colleagues in the same profession, and eventually they decided to start their own business together. So now Cindy is in partnership with her husband, Sam, in a fast-paced, service-oriented business that they're working to build together. And she's a new wife. And she's a stepmom to 3 stepkids who happen to have a lot going on.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of moving parts to Cindy's world now. And one of them is her ongoing arrangement with her ex-spouse to basically be on call and drop everything to attend to their son, even during her ex's visitation time.
Yeah, it wasn't too long into their blend that Cindy and Sam began experiencing some disagreement and some disconnection in their relationship as a result of all this. Sam was frustrated every time their plans would get interrupted or even canceled because Cindy's ex needed her to help with their son. Cindy did her best to juggle all those obligations. She'd moved business meetings around and she tried to do what she had to do so that she could go and grab her son when she needed to. But you know what? Things became really stressful for her and for Sam. And because visitation with his kids didn't exactly match up to hers, sometimes she'd end up missing out on family activities or events when her ex would request help at the last minute. Or she wouldn't be available for Sam when he really needed her.
Right.
Yeah.
So they reached out and they asked for our help in setting and maintaining an appropriate boundary with Cindy's ex. Seems reasonable and simple, right? Well, not so much. It wasn't that simple because Cindy was experiencing some really tough emotions around all of this.
Yeah.
Now, she realized things weren't working in her arrangement with her ex and that it was causing a lot of stress in her marriage and for her new blended family. But she was conflicted. If she were to give up her first right of refusal and stop being the on-call parent for her ex, what would that say about her as a mother? And how would that impact her relationship with her son and with her ex, who probably isn't going to be very happy to lose out on her last-minute help that he's really come to depend on?
That's right. And that takes us right back to our last strategy, right? Cindy needed to examine her emotions, stay rooted in the truth, and identify the values that were important to her and to Sam and their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we helped her to do right in front of Sam so that he could also empathize with the internal struggle that was going on inside of Cindy. You know, Cindy was holding on to a belief that she would be a bad mom if she didn't step in and help out when her ex was busy. If she let him down, she'd also be letting her son down, right? That was the story in her head.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the truth about Cindy. She was an amazing, supportive mom and a loving stepmom. And Sam was able to affirm that truth in her and help to ease some of that emotional struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Then they were able to identify the values that were important to them. As it turns out, healthy boundaries is something that they both value, and they want to model that to their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, when we're doing something for someone else that they should or could be doing for themselves, there's probably an unhealthy boundary in the relationship. The more we explored this situation with Cindy and Sam, the more Cindy realized that her ex should be the one taking responsibility for their son during his visitation time.
Right.
She shared that sometimes she'd be asked to pick up their son simply because her ex was running late at the gym while he was working out or doing other things that could have been handled by him and his current wife more efficiently. The truth was that her ex was perfectly capable of managing his visitation time, but had become dependent on Cindy to pick up the slack for him.
Mm-hmm. And although it took time for Cindy to kind of release herself from this role, she also realized that it would benefit her son in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the example being set for him wasn't necessarily in line with their family values. At Dad's house, he was learning that you really didn't have to manage your own responsibilities. You could put them off on someone else. And from her end, her son was witnessing an example of an unhealthy boundary and the stress and resentment and chaos that kind of hit Mom, Cindy, when she was in the middle of all this.
Right.
And then on top of that, this little guy was not experiencing the stability and security that comes from a clear visitation schedule. He was kind of bouncing back and forth from parent to parent at any given time. And that can sometimes bring about some emotional ups and downs for kids and some confusion.
Right.
Yeah.
So while Cindy believed the arrangement at the time was best for everyone, eventually she realized that setting and maintaining a healthy boundary with her ex was actually better for her son. And it was better for her marriage and family as well.
Right.
So how did she set this new appropriate boundary? We're glad you asked, because we've got a quick framework for setting healthy boundaries, and this works in any relationship. But let's talk about how Cindy used this to set the boundary with her ex-spouse.
That's right. It's a really simple framework, and we haven't come up with a good name or acronym for it yet. So we just call it Affirm Can't Can. So the first step in the framework is affirm. Start by affirming your ex. And you can do this even when you don't agree with them. So for Cindy, it sounded something like, I know it's important to you that our son is well cared for. That's it for the affirm step, right? It's usually something very simple. Now, in Cindy's unique situation, she might add something like, and I know that after our divorce, I asked for the first right of refusal and offered to care for our son when you needed some help. So she's kind of owning her part in the situation and just calling out the reality of how things started, right? You can sometimes do that. Don't over-explain, though. Keep it simple.
Right. May not be appropriate every time. Now, the next step is to state your can't, what you can't do.
That's right.
So for Cindy, that sounded something like, things have changed in my life and I can't be available to you whenever you might need help. Now, you don't always need to give an explanation up front, but in this case, it's helpful because it's true, right?
Yeah.
Had Cindy still been single, this boundary might not even need to be set.
Yeah, it'd probably be a non-issue.
But if you do need to give an explanation, be careful not to throw your current spouse under the bus.
That's right. What Cindy didn't say was, hey, you know, Sam's really upset that I'm at your beck and call, so I'm not available to help you anymore. No. Don't blame anyone. Simply stick to the facts. hey, a lot has changed, and that's really truthful. She's remarried now and has additional responsibilities, and she did not have that before.
Right.
So that's affirm and can't. So what's the final step, honey?
Next is to state what you can do. So this might be, I can consider helping out when you need it, but you'll need to give me at least a day's notice, and then I'll let you know if I'm available to help.
Yeah.
This can give Cindy and Sam flexibility. Maybe sometimes it's fine for Cindy to help out if they don't have anything else going on and it fits into their values, but other times they might decide it's not going to work out.
That's right. And that's just one example of a can, of something that somebody can do, right? And this is where Cindy and Sam can come together and brainstorm what the boundary will actually look like. They might decide that it's impractical to help at all during the ex's visitation, and then Cindy can say something like, I can continue to work toward a cooperative co-parenting relationship with you.
That would be her can.
Exactly. Or maybe I can still be available in an emergency situation. Or I can be available to help most weekends and holidays, but I'm going to need to know in advance, right? It can't just be any time of the week.
Yeah, this is where you as a couple get to come together and collaborate. You get to decide where to set the new boundary.
That's right.
And then you'll need to work as a team to evaluate and maintain the boundary as time goes by, because flexibility is also an important aspect of healthy boundaries.
Okay, so affirm simply by acknowledging what's important to your ex, and then let them know what you can't do, and follow that up with what you can do. Affirm, can't, can.
That's it.
That's a simple framework for setting a healthy boundary, really with anyone, including an ex-spouse. And by the way, as you're figuring all this out, it's okay to write it down and even use your notes during the conversation. I can't tell you how many times I've written down my thoughts on a notepad when I knew that I was headed into a boundary-setting conversation so that I could be kind, I could be succinct, and I could keep the conversation to the point. So if you're afraid that the framework is going to slip from your mind in the moment, because emotions can be high sometimes, just take a few minutes to write it down beforehand and use your notes. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, that's a great tip, honey. And then as you're giving your affirm, can't, can, you're going to want to brace yourself for impact.
That's right.
And expect there to be some pushback.
Yeah.
As human beings, we tend to resist change, and ex-spouses can naturally tend to be oppositional towards each other. So don't be caught off guard if your ex responds negatively to the new boundary. That's okay. Expect it. They might even get angry or accusational, or maybe even label you as a bad, uncaring parent, right? That's the big dig.
Yuck.
But don't allow their response to shake your boundary. Don't take that bait.
That's right.
Instead, stay calm, don't get defensive, and simply become a broken record.
That's right. Just repeat it back again.
Rinse and repeat.
I know it's important to you that our son is well cared for. I can't be available to you whenever you might need help. However, I can consider helping out when you give me at least a day's notice, and then I'll let you know if I'm available.
There we go.
Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat as many times as you need to, but don't let their anger, manipulation, or guilt trip derail your healthy boundary. No one likes it when other people set boundaries that haven't been set before. Honestly, when people do that with me, I don't like it either. So just being a broken record is something that you may need to continue doing as you maintain that new boundary and as your ex has some time to adjust to it, right? They might struggle and they can take their frustrations out on you. Who better to take it out on than the person they feel is
they're
causing
going to test
pain.
the boundary for sure.
So just be prepared for that. Stay calm, maintain self-control, and just stay rooted in your truth.
Yeah. And you can use this boundary setting framework, the affirm, can't, can, with any situation that needs to be addressed or around decisions with a former spouse. I understand it's important for you to get the dead rat out of your basement. I can't take care of that for you, but I can give you the number of a good exterminator.
Yeah, I love that.
That's a real life scenario that one couple shared with us, by the way.
An ex calling to get the dead rat out of the basement.
Yeah.
That's right. Here's a couple more. I know we've always celebrated the kid's birthday together, and these celebrations are important to you. but things have changed and I can't do joint parties anymore. I can be flexible with the schedule so that we're each able to plan celebrations for the kids' birthdays independently, right? Or how about this one? I understand it's important for our son to have an instrument for band and that you're doing your best to take care of that. I can't give you an answer right now on how much I'll contribute, but I'll let you know tomorrow what I might be able to do.
Yeah, those are great. And in that last one, after he and his current wife brainstorm different ideas and agree on what's right for them based on their family budget and values, then he can go back to his ex-wife with something like, I appreciate that you're being proactive about our son's need for an instrument. I can either contribute $75 towards a new instrument and help our son raise the additional money needed. Or another option is that he can rent an instrument and I'm willing to help pay for the rental fee.
Yeah, that's great.
Giving a couple of options can be really helpful with an ex-spouse.
Yep.
But only do that if these are options that you and your current spouse are both good with and agree on.
Yeah, and I loved how you kind of wedged in there that whole, hey, I can help our son raise some money that's needed, because there's probably a value behind that.
Right.
Saying, kind of like we had with unicycles, of, hey, we want to teach resourcefulness and responsibility and that kind of thing.
Contribution.
So we actually use that as part of a learning process. So anyway, I like the way you wedged that in there.
Thank you.
You know, we know that setting and maintaining appropriate boundaries and changing established patterns with an ex, it's just hard. It's challenging. But if you want to make wise decisions rather than snap decisions, and if you want to reduce the tension or conflict in your marriage that gets triggered because of those difficult negotiations with an ex, then learning to maintain healthy boundaries is critical.
Yeah, it's a must. And just one more thought. Sometimes we hear about ex-spouses who are intrusive. They tend to impose themselves and kind of trespass into the other home, whether the kids are there or not. You know, they'll reach out with excessive, inappropriate communications, or they just interject their own opinions and judgments around what's going on in your home. If this sounds like a familiar pain point for you, we encourage you to listen to episode 91. It's called, Is Your Husband's Hostile Ex-Wife Invading Your Life, Stealing Your Joy and Confidence? And by the way, the strategies we share in that episode also relate to invasive ex-husbands.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, we just tend to hear it more about coming from ex-wives.
That's true. We see that as a bit of a pattern.
Yeah, but go back and check that out if you're feeling that pain.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're going to put a few other links to past episodes that focus on effective co-parenting strategies as well, and some practical ways to improve your co-parenting relationship. But for this episode, those are really your 3 strategies to set some appropriate boundaries and negotiate well. First, we want to push pause on the pressure. Don't make those snap decisions.
Then examine your emotions, stay rooted in the truth, and identify your family's values.
That's right. And last but certainly not least, set and maintain healthy boundaries, remembering the Affirm Can framework.
And remember that if you feel stuck and need a little support, there's some good news. We're here for you.
That's right.
Just use the link in the show notes to schedule a free coaching call with us. We're happy to help.
Absolutely. And you know what? That makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.